Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Healing Lyme Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Mariah Hinchy. And today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Beth McDougall, who is an integrative medical doctor. And she is one of the founders of Jizen Center, which is a multidisciplinary treatment center for Lyme disease. Welcome, Dr. Beth. Tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you came to specialize in treating Lyme disease.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I've been practicing since 1998 and came right out of the gate of internal medicine residency, knowing I was going to do an integrative practice. And so came right into an integrative medical practice in the Bay Area. And I was very holistic in my thinking and was very interested in bioidentical hormone balancing, natural neurotransmitter balancing, working with the gut, working very functionally. I was in the first crop of doctors that went through functional medicine training in 1999. And very early in the practice, I began seeing infectious disease that looked like Lyme disease, seemed like Lyme disease. In the early days of IGeneX Lab, I started diagnosing Lyme disease. And the way I handled it in the beginning was more, there were some really well schooled like professionals in the Bay Area that were treating Lyme disease almost exclusively. So then I was referring to them and co-managing people in the beginning. And so I diagnosed a lot of Lyme disease. I co-managed a lot of Lyme disease. I didn't treat it myself. I was never a huge fan of antibiotic treatment for Lyme disease. And so I would let others do that. And then in 2004, I developed Lyme disease myself. I was camping and while camping pulled a little tiny tick off the back of my daughter's ear. So I knew it was in tick country. And I wasn't aware of being bit by a tick at all. But then 2 weeks later, I was home and was seeing a patient. And all of a sudden, in my appointment with the patient, I couldn't move my hand. And then I stood up and couldn't move my foot properly. I started not being able to move my tongue properly. And I knew I needed to go to the hospital if I was having a stroke, but I drew my blood before I left to go to the hospital and sent it to IGeneX because I had taken a tick off my daughter. And sure enough, even after a multi-thousand-dollar workup, including, CAT scan, transesophageal echo, and all sorts of things. Left the hospital with no answers, and then 2 weeks later, my Lyme disease test came back positive, so Western blot. So I began a journey in 2004. Ended up with terrible response to antibiotics, like bad. Like I was throwing micro clots, and they were, I was seeing it in my fingernails, and just it was not a course of therapy that was working for me. And so then I had to forge my own path against the recommendation of a lot of my colleagues who were like, you need to be on IV antibiotics for this many weeks. And I ended up doing a lot of oxidative treatments, a lot of homeopathy, a lot of nutrient therapy. It was before Byron White's were out, before Susan McCamish's formulas, but I was finding my own herbal treatments. And then I realized that a lot of other things needed to be brought to bear to the situation in order to fully heal. I needed to do a lot of energy work, deep meditation. I changed my diet, and I gradually kind of walked out of this like pretty scary situation. But it took me 8 years to fully recover. And thankfully, I've learned a ton along the way that has allowed me to help people in a much shorter period of time. I don't expect anyone to have to go through that long journey, but I think I needed to go through it in order to learn what I learned along the way. And so, yeah, I have now been approaching Lyme disease in a very comprehensive, holistic manner because that is what it takes, I find, to unwind the chronic Lyme disease cases. They're complex, and it really takes the absolute best of integrative medicine and bringing everything that we know to bear on the situation in order to fully unwind it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's pretty amazing. I have a similar story and I always say like I went through what I went through to be able to learn what I learned to be able to treat my patients the way that I'm able to treat them now, and had I not been through it firsthand, I wouldn't be able to identify with so much of what they identify with from these infections.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
So
think that is the course of the healer. Yeah.
yeah. So you have a pretty amazing center there, I hear. Tell us more about it. Tell us about the different modalities that you have brought in under one roof.
Yeah. So I moved my clinic of over 20 years into this larger center that I helped create with a couple other co-founders. And it's got integrative medicine, intravenous medicine, a full laboratory, the largest suite of energetic biohacking technologies for health under one roof in the world. We've been told by so many people. And it has a full integrative medical, like a integrative bodywork department with an all-star cast down there, including physical therapists, deep tissue therapists. We utilize a lot of technology down there, like shockwave and wind back and a variety of things to kind of break up fascial adhesions. We do a lot of analysis of gait and posture and ability to do functional movements and see, we diagnose body asymmetry. We have a full neuroscience wing where we have an incredible neuroscientist named Cindy Reynolds who does 19 channel EEG brain mapping and neuromodulation and neural feedback. And it really takes all of the things that we have here to bring to bear on the situation with people to unwind it fully. So for example, like, it's a little different. If you just get bit by a tick and you have an acute infection, you can often treat that quickly, and that's simple. But what I tend to see are people that have been sick for a really long time. Maybe they were sick kicking around the medical establishment for a while before they were finally diagnosed with Lyme. Uh, or maybe they were treated and someone didn't pay attention to co-infections or didn't pay attention to the potential of, they had been exposed to mold or something like that. And so they were only partially treated and didn't really get better from that. Or, maybe someone has even been through like enormous antibiotic courses and still they're not quite feeling right. And so I created this center not just to treat Lyme disease, but chronic disease, a variety. But what I find is that oftentimes a Lyme patient could be kind of broken into some categories. You have those individuals that are slow detoxifiers, and they have trouble when you start treating their pathogens because it generates a lot of toxins and they have a hard time getting them out. So we have strategies for that. We have those individuals where their symptom presentation is largely neurological. They have mood changes, brain fog, headaches, or even peripheral neurological issues like muscle fasciculations, neuropathy, etc. And then we have those that have more of a body focus, where they have joint pain, muscle pain, or those that have more of a fatigue type presentation. And sometimes people have a little of all of it. And so that's why we needed to kind of create this enormous ecosystem here, is to kind of provide the resources to address all of the issues. Because what I find is that, so for example, let's just break it down, starting off with the poor detoxifiers. Sometimes people, we really need to, like, before we treat anything, we need to focus on opening up the pathways of elimination. So we do that in various ways. We do it with some kind of gut work, liver flushes. We do a lot of drainage remedies, oral drainage remedies, a lot of intravenous drainage remedies. We have a Hocket here, which is an infrared ozone sauna. So we may like spend the first couple weeks, we may spend in really severe cases the first month really just opening up those pathways of elimination so that when we do turn our attention to treating pathogens, people can get that stuff out of the body without it making them feel worse. And then if someone has a lot of body issues, it's really important to address that, because I find that pathogens like to hide in areas of stagnation in the body. So a lot of times, people have hold themselves in particular ways. They have kind of incorporated their biography, kind of encoded it in their biology, and it affects the way that they hold themselves. And they may have, let's say, kind of a head forward posture, or their shoulders might be elevated, or maybe they had an injury at a young age and it kind of like tweaked their pelvis or something, and they have these structural asymmetries. Well, that's going to lead to some fascial adhesions, and that's going to be the type of area where pathogens are going to like to hide and proliferate. And it's really hard for the immune system to get in there, and even your therapeutics to flow in there to treat what's there. So what we find is that simultaneous with the treatment, we need to be helping people to become aware of kind of how they're holding themselves and their structural asymmetries, and working in various ways to kind of realign, with myofascial work, shockwave, which is focused ultrasound to break up fascial adhesions, like functional exercises to try to kind of like rebalance the posture. We find that very helpful. And then if someone has really a strong neurological focus, we do 19 channel EEG brain mapping. And this has been an incredibly invaluable tool, because we find that sometimes people have traumatic birth, sometimes they have emotionally traumatic childhoods, and a lot of times that will lead to the limbic system in the brain being stuck on. So it's like firing 24/7, and then that can result in the autonomic nervous system being stuck in a fight or flight state, which impairs your immune response, and it makes it much harder to get rid of infections. So we have a lot of techniques here for calming the limbic system down, for balancing the autonomic nervous system. And then, of course, if there is a history of head trauma, we can spot that on an EEG and then work on healing the areas of brain injury. And doing that simultaneous with treating infections really allows us to get those pathogens out of the nervous system.
Yeah, I think it's so important to do a holistic approach where you're simultaneously treating all of it so that the patient can heal. Do you have like a specific way that you would rotate patients through, or specific protocols that you develop for patients?
Yeah. And everyone's unique, and I'm sure you practice that way as well. There's no like specific protocol that's a one size fits all. It's very individualized, but we can kind of start with a skeletal backbone of, definitely be thinking of these things in people that are presenting in this way. But yes, we design protocols that kind of like work throughout the ecosystem. And so everyone needs some degree of opening up pathways of elimination. Then we turn our attention to treating infection. And I love oxidative treatments. So we do a lot of EbO2 here, just auto chemotherapy with ozone and light wavelengths. We do a lot of other types of kind of intravenous therapies for treating infectious disease. And then meanwhile, we're sending them to the Hocket so they can detoxify that way. And we're sometimes pairing the IVs with the drainage remedy IVs. And then depending on their focus, we'll be working on brain training, brain neuromodulation, neural feedback, or a lot of body work, or both, depending. And then at a certain point, you need to begin doing therapies geared toward upregulating mitochondria and cellular health. So that is a huge focus here. I do red light, near infrared light bed therapy, intermittent hypoxic training, exercise with oxygen therapy, hyperbaric. We do all these things to help to boost mitochondrial function, stimulate mitophagy, which is where the body will kind of edit and repair and eliminate damaged mitochondria, birth new, more pristine mitochondria. We do a lot of intravenous NAD to try to upregulate mitochondrial function that way, as well as oral supplements. And an area we didn't really speak about yet, that I think is foundational to people getting better, is to do some work kind of excavating and helping people become aware of and then releasing where they have stored trauma in their system. And sometimes we see it encoded in the nervous system, but other times it's stuck in the energetic anatomy of the body, and it becomes an impediment to fully resolving, healing, fully healing. So we do resonance biofeedback therapy here and deep energy work with people that are interested in pursuing that, because I think that deep level is foundational.
Yeah, I agree. So, what would you give as advice to a potential patient who's listening? What would be your top three pieces of advice that you would give a patient when it comes to seeking treatment?
Well, be wary of people that think they can approach it fully on a physical level. One pathogen, here's a treatment for that pathogen. That's all you need. And then, of course, and I'm sure other people on this summit have talked about this, be wary of thinking it's one thing, because oftentimes it's not just Borrelia, it's Borrelia and co-infections. It's Bartonella, it's Babesia, it's Rickettsia, maybe Mycoplasma, maybe Chlamydia, maybe the stress of having those infections has led to some viral reactivation. Maybe there's been some lifetime exposure to mold, and now you have mycotoxins in the system. Someone definitely needs to be paying attention to the diet and making sure that you're eating the foods that are right for you and the hormone balance. And so all of these things need to be addressed. And so be wary of practitioners that think it's just like one bug, one treatment, that's all you need.
Yeah. Anything else?
um, I think also it's important to do some deep introspection and work on an energetic level. I think that meditating and developing a practice where you can sink in and really get to know what you are holding in your system is going to go a long way toward eliminating the the, the pathogens and coming to a state of great vitality. The other thing that I think is important is being mindful while you're going through the process. I know that was so important for me because your emotional vibration plays a big role. And when I had neurological symptoms, they were kind of scary. And so if I allowed myself to kind of get really fearful about my future, so if I started futurizing and kind of stayed out of the present moment, I would see my symptoms kind of spiral out of control. And then if I could become aware that I was really out of the present moment, fearful about the future, and just could kind of bring myself back to the moment, I could calm those symptoms down. So we're really powerful. Our minds are incredibly powerful, and we need our minds to be on the team, so to speak. We need to be helping ourselves out by staying present.
Yeah, I think one of the common themes from this summit that most of the guest experts have really brought up and reinforced is that, if you don't think you're going to get better, you're probably not going to get better. So having hope and trusting that you will get better, and almost like having that as your mantra. I always tell my patients, like, you don't have to, don't lie to yourself. Don't say you're healed. Like, obviously, your body doesn't know that's true. But, if you say, like, I'm healing, I'm getting better and better every day, you know what I mean? It goes a long way. And that positive outlook, um, and gratitude for even the smallest little steps, right, that you're making, um, as improvements go a long way to stop you from going down that spiral.
I could not agree more. That is so important. And I remember in the early days, one of the most impactful things that I had was this energy healer that I worked with that was holding this vision for me of being entirely well. She almost like refused to see me as not entirely well. And it was a little frustrating at first because I was like so not feeling well. But then I was able to kind of begin holding that for myself and then resonating with that. And then I realized that I was able to kind of dual track it, where there was a part of me that was always focused on me as a thriving, well person, and then going through the steps of treating what I had. And so it was like, you can do that. You can kind of acknowledge what's going on in your body and take the steps to improve it whilst holding this vision of yourself as well. And I think that's really required for recovering from anything, whether it's cancer or, a neuro disease or Lyme, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think also, well, obviously, being sick for a long period of time, like having a chronic illness, is going to, impact your mindset and your outlook and your vision in a certain negative way. But also like dealing with the fact that there are certain centers in our brains when we have this stuff that actually are inflamed and almost on fire, right? That are bringing out various neuropsychiatric symptoms,
Mhm.
that it's a huge double whammy. And so I think for a lot of Lyme patients, having that positive mindset and going through all of this is hard because you have the physiological impacts, but then you also have like the emotional impacts. But working with a good therapist or healer, energetic healer, whatever they may be, to help you get there just is so impactful. And it really impacts your immune system in a positive way, and your ability to actually heal.
I completely agree. Yeah. Yeah, and you bring up such a good point about how inflammation in the nervous system affects our mood and outlook. And I also find it affects our ability to sleep. I mean,
Mm.
I see that all the time. And so one of the things that I find indispensable in being able to help someone is working with the neuroscientist here, because I can do a 19 channel EEG on somebody and right away tell if their brain is inflamed, if it's on fire, or if there's like kind of like dormant, like areas that have low voltage and are under firing. So it's like this beautiful window in to what's going on. And then of course I would be handling things differently if the brain is inflamed. So it is interesting because we do, when the brain is inflamed, we do need to be kind of working on, quenching free radicals, working with anti-inflammatory type therapies, pulling toxins out of the brain, and then treating infections in a way that is something they can tolerate.
Yeah, so you bring up such an important point with sleep, right? And the immune system's ability to function properly and repair the body and all of that, when you have a chronic illness. What are some of your favorite, I don't want to say remedies, but what are some of your favorite approaches to a patient who isn't able to sleep due to an infection like Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Well, of course, I'll bring everything integrative medicine has to bear on it, like, working with supplements such as like magnesium L-threonate and L-theanine and GABA and magnolia bark. And I find hormone balancing incredibly important. because the steroid hormones have anti-inflammatory properties. And so if you have this, if you're unfortunate enough to have this kind of synergizing with perimenopause, or, kind of maybe even secondary adrenal fatigue from the stress of all of this, and the levels of these steroid hormones are going down, that's going to exacerbate your body's inflammatory tendency. So really, I think breaking into the situation by like balancing the hormones first off can be incredibly helpful, and then you can be working with supplements on top of that. Even things like intravenous glutathione, if someone can tolerate that, can quench inflammation. And then gentle detox, like with the neurodrainage remedies, that can begin to pull the toxins out of the brain. Usually we can begin to get people sleeping. Um, Occasionally we have to work with some pharmaceuticals, and I always thought, I don't love pharmaceuticals, and I don't love lifetime use of pharmaceuticals for sleep, but like if you need to take something in order to sleep, it's better to sleep than not sleep. So I think in the beginning, sometimes that's where it's like judicious use of pharmaceuticals comes in.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Sleep is so important.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
Um, so do you have a favorite modality there in your center that you
Mm.
want to talk about more?
Boy, there's so many that I love, but I would say we have 3 Novathor beds. They're the red and near infrared light beds. It almost looks like a tanning bed. You get in, you take your clothes off, you get in, and then you close the lid down. And it's red and near infrared light wavelengths. And those wavelengths of light are incredibly powerful for upregulating mitochondrial function in a lot of disease processes. And because of infections or toxins, sometimes cytochrome C oxidase, one of the enzymes in the electron transport chain, gets blocked. And so the energy production goes way down. And the red light and near infrared light wavelengths will kick that toxin or that pathogen off of that enzyme, kind of liberating it so that it can begin functioning fully again. And so it really improves energy production within the cell, which then has so many ramifications, because when you have more energy being produced in the cell, it alters the cellular pH. It alters the cell membrane potential, which is almost like the little aura around the cell of electrical charge that can improve the health of the cell and make it less vulnerable to invasion with microorganisms. So the red light and near infrared light wavelengths improve energy production within the cell, but they also have been shown to be anti-inflammatory, immune modulatory, and they release the tissue-specific growth factors that are, going to help with the healing and the repair of the joints and the tendons and the ligaments and the brain. So red light therapy is so helpful, and usually recommend someone do it like a couple times a week to 3 times a week for up to 20 minutes.
Yep, I was just going to ask. Red light therapy is amazing. I was wondering how many times a week you recommend it. And is that something that a patient can find you and come there to do, or do
Yeah.
they have to do a whole, well-rounded approach? Or if someone just
Oh, yeah.
wanted to come and do red light, could they do that?
Yes, they could. Yeah, they could do that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many therapies I love here. We have exercise with oxygen therapy here. And sometimes it's the first time that a chronically fatigued patient can actually begin exercising. So I've had people that have like horrible exercise tolerance, tremendous post-exertion fatigue, and they can't exercise. But then if you have them exercise while breathing oxygen, they can. And they don't have that like that lingering fatigue afterwards. So it's been a way to build up endurance in people that are very, very deconditioned. And then it builds on itself, because they can begin to build some muscle mass, and your muscle contains a lot of mitochondria, and then the mitochondria generate more energy, and it just kind of brings up the energetics of the entire body. So love that. And the exercise that we typically recommend is called Vasper. And Vasper is used by Olympic athletes. It's used by professional sports teams. It's where kind of like recumbent device and you're pushing with your arms and your legs while you have compression cuffs on your upper arms and upper thighs that have cold liquid going in. So it's a 20-minute workout, but you get the benefits of like a 2-hour workout because you're getting aerobic and anaerobic benefits because of the compression. Excuse me.
Mhm.
But anyway, so that with oxygen is a game changer for a lot of people with Lyme.
So would you do both of those together?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you need a second? I can have them edit this out.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Are you good?
I'm good, I think.
I had a cold 2 weeks ago, of course. It was like finally got sick and I was like just finishing. And you know how like you breathe the wrong way sometimes when you
Yeah.
have a cold and it like went down the wrong way. I had to leave. I came back, I had like tears running down my face. I was like,
Oh,
this is terrible.
oh man, that's the worst. At least they can edit it.
At least they can edit it. Yes.
Yeah, and boy, there's so many other therapies I love here. It's just crazy. You gotta come.
Yeah, I would love to come and see the place. So
Mhm.
listen, since we're gonna have them edit this anyways, so I don't wanna, I don't wanna keep asking like, is there anything, anything else that you want to talk about? So is there anything that you want me to prompt you to talk about before we end the interview?
Um, Maybe just some of the other therapies that we do.
Okay.
Um, for mitochondrial upregulation, I think that's so critical. But there's so much we could talk about. I mean, like, do you do the IGL test?
What's that?
It's a test that we send to Germany to see like toxins that are like complexed in the cell membranes and in the
No.
intracellular membranes.
So I'll ask you about upregulating this, like if you have any other specific therapies for upregulating the mitochondria, and then
Mhm.
it's IGL.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and PKIVs, so I'll just mention that at the end.
Okay. All right. So we'll jump back in.
Okay.
Okay. So tell me what other tests you have there to help to sorry, start over. Okay. So Dr. Beth, tell me what other modalities you have there to help to upregulate the mitochondrial function.
Quite a few. Well, one of them that I love is intermittent hypoxic training. So, intermittent hypoxic training is where you're breathing oxygen through a mask while you're lying in a recliner chair, and the coach will cycle you from normal levels of oxygen to mild hypoxia and back 4 times in a session. So it's like being at sea level and then going up to altitude and coming back 4 times in a 40-minute session. And in 2019, 3 scientists won the Nobel Prize for discovering something called HIF1 alpha. This procedure releases HIF1 alpha, and what that is a master gene regulator that will trigger the transcription of thousands of genes that are involved in how we utilize oxygen. So it basically enhances the efficiency with which we utilize oxygen and generate energy from oxygen and glucose. And so it causes you to make more hemoglobins, you have better oxygen carrying capacity, it causes you to sprout new capillaries, so you have better oxygen delivery, it improves the coupling of oxygen in the mitochondria for energy production. It even activates these things called GLUTs, which are insulin independent glucose transporters into the cell. So this therapy is great for metabolic syndrome, losing fat mass. It also triggers something called mitophagy, which is really kind of the holy grail in medicine. What we're trying to do is have the body more efficiently kind of like edit and repair or even destroy damaged mitochondria and then birth more pristine mitochondria. And this therapy has been shown to do that. It's got tons of clinical research on, treating various types of conditions, but we find it really helps upregulate mitochondria function. So we'll do that for Lyme patients. So I think I mentioned before, a lot of pathogens that have an intracellular stage in their life cycle can go also into the mitochondria and begin to suppress the mitochondrial function. So this is kind of an antidote to that.
So if someone was going to do this therapy, how many times a week and for how long would they have to do it before you would see like a substantial increase in highly functioning mitochondria?
About 30 treatments. So
And is that within like a certain window of
kind of
time?
depends. You know, we have people traveling from around the world to come to our center, and they may come for, let's say, a 4 week, 6 week, or even a 90-day period of time. And they're just trying to get those 30 treatments within the time that they're here. You know,
Right.
some people do it 5 days a week. Some people do it just like 2 to 3 times a week based on their protocol. And we will create these stacks. So, you know, sometimes people will be getting an IV in the morning. Let's say they come in, they do some brain training, then they get an IV, then they might go do like a Novathor bed, then the intermittent hypoxic training, they might do a cryotherapy treatment. Later, they might do the exercise with oxygen or on a different day. You know, so then they're heading to the integrative bodywork department and they're seeing the physical therapist down there or the deep tissue therapist. Maybe they're doing the shockwave therapy to break up fascial adhesions. So it kind of depends on the individual and what they're presenting with, but we create these protocols for them that involve multiple therapies stacked in a day.
That seems like the smart way to do it so they're not coming back and forth to the center multiple times a week.
Right. Yes.
So you had mentioned earlier or when we were off the air about PK IVs. Is that something that you would work into these stacked sessions as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. Often necessary. So PKIVs it's a really tried and true protocol I've been using for, I don't know, maybe like almost 20 years. And it's intravenous phospholipids followed by glutathione and folinic acid. And then at a certain point, we add in some phenylbutyrate as well. And what that's most of the toxins that we're exposed to in our lifetime are fat soluble. And so they tend to collect in the fatty compartments of our body. And one of the largest fat reservoirs in the body are collectively all of our cell membranes and even the membranes of our intracellular organelles like mitochondria. And when you collect toxins in those membranes, it begins to disrupt cellular health and energy production. And so, like if someone's been exposed to mold, mycotoxins are fat soluble, for example, and they're going to collect. If someone has had Lyme and co-infections for a long time, even during the treatment of those co-infections, you know, those infections, you're generating a lot of biotoxins. And very oftentimes those will go into hiding in the cell membranes. And you at some point need to go and sweep those out. Heavy metals are fat soluble. Petroleum solvents, glyphosate, pesticides, you name it. So a lot of what we're exposed to is fat soluble. So we do a very sophisticated test called IgL that we send to Germany in certain cases, and it measures DNA, adductive toxins, and then toxins that are complexed in the cell membranes and even in mitochondrial membranes. And it can measure, it's a good window into mitochondrial function. So if we see a very high toxic load in someone, we need to begin to sweep that out. And of course, I've talked in the beginning about opening up pathways of elimination and the infrared ozone sauna and how beneficial those things are. But sometimes you still have to go and kind of sweep it out of the cell membranes and then mop up what gets eliminated. And so we sweep with the phospholipids and then collect with glutathione and folinic acid.
Take a break. You need water?
God,
I was there. I get it.
it never happens.
Wow, that is a beautiful crystal.
Thank you. Oh my God. Yeah, it's like Out of all the interviews I've done in my life, I've never had a.
It's all right.
Okay.
So
Anyways,
you were, I think you coughed when, I mean, I don't know how much you want it edited, and I'm happy to make them send it to you. You know what I mean?
I mean,
For your,
I'm okay with a little cough. Everyone
yeah,
coughs.
okay. I just want to make sure. Some people aren't.
Yeah. So I'll just pick up and just say, so we flush out these toxins with the phospholipids, and then we mop them up with glutathione, which is a sulfating agent, and then methylating agents like folinic acid and methylcobalamin. And that is the best way to then route these toxins out of the body.
So are all of these in one IV, or you would do them in a sequential order?
So the PK protocol is a series of sequential IVs in all at the same time. So you do just one right after the other. And that's the protocol.
But they would be containing the glutathione and the folinic acid and
Yeah, so
everything in the
you got the
IV. Okay.
phospholipids, and then you hang
Yep.
separately the phenylbutyrate, then you hang separately the glutathione, and then B vitamins at the end.
And then how many of those would you recommend?
It just depends on the person. Like it depends on the levels of the toxins, whether they have had mold exposure. Oftentimes, if you've been exposed to mold, you're going to have a lot of mycotoxin exposure.
Mhm.
You will see, for example, on the 19 channel EEG brain map, low voltage in the brain because mycotoxins are direct mitochondrial poisons. And when the mitochondria are suppressed, the energy production goes down, and we see that as low voltage in the brain. So when we look at a brain map, if we see this kind of blue brain, which is their kind of color coding for low voltage, it's it's amazing. Like if we begin detoxing mycotoxins, you will see the voltage of the brain starting to come up. And we, of course, can do other types of therapies like the Violite on the brain in specific areas to kind of improve the mitochondria. So, like just how you can get in the Novathor bed, which is a red light near infrared light bed, you can wear special no red lights on the skull that like will penetrate down and activate the mitochondria that way. So truly, at the end of the day, we are doing so many different things to try to upregulate mitochondrial function because that is the foundation. I already said like your childhood traumas and cleaning the energetic anatomy is the foundation, but like from a cellular foundation, it's the mitochondrial health that you need to pay attention to.
Right. And it's so important. And like you said, it's so much more than just focusing on killing an organism. You
Oh
know,
no.
even when we're looking at the
Yeah.
opportunistic infections and the co-infections and all of those things, I always say it's like, patients come in and finally they're like, yes, I found the underlying cause of all of my issues. It's Lyme disease, or it's this infection, or it's that infection. And I'm kind of like, I take it a step further and I'm like, but actually now what have those infections done to create other underlying causes in the body, right? And it's like, so we have to be a detective and go in and figure out like all of these other things that have been altered in the body, like the mitochondria. And it's like we have to simultaneously just fix everything while trying to kill these infections.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And unless you do, you don't get better.
Right.
People have even said, I don't think you actually get rid of Lyme disease. You just put it in a dormant state or it never really goes away. Or I don't believe that anymore. I think you can really get it out.
Yeah, I think it's all about the immune system. I think if you can recover the immune system and get the immune system to function properly, then
Mhm.
it is possible for your immune system to get it out of your body.
Yeah.
Um, it's just hard to tell, in the end. Is it
Mhm.
there in remission or is it out of the body? And I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But- So
Yes.
why don't you let our listeners know where and how they can find you if they'd like to become a patient?
They can go online to Jyzen.com, which is Jyzen. And they can also find me on social media, Beth McDougall, MD.
Okay. And are you accepting new patients?
I do. I have a long waiting list, but we all practice exactly the same way here. And Dr. Maria Marion, who's incredible, is accepting new patients, and we handle things absolutely the same.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any last pieces of advice for our listeners before we sign off?
Just that have hope. You can get through this. I have done it for so many people, including myself, and you can bring yourself all the way back to an incredible state of health and vitality, and maybe even healthier than you were before.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much again for joining us, Dr. Beth. And thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time for another episode of Healing Lyme. Take care.
Wonderful, Moran. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.